Hello, and welcome to another episode of Tuesdays with Tally. The mission and the goal of this podcast is to bring an engaging conversation that will add value to the lives of everyday people. We will inspire, encourage, educate, and tell the stories of America's finest men and women in an effort to motivate you to live your life to its fullest potential. Be sure to follow us on social media and search Tuesdays with Tally. Be sure to subscribe, follow, and share the program as well. And now your host, Brian Tally.
Welcome back to Tuesdays with Tally Podcast, where we add real-life value to the lives of everyday people. Be sure to follow us on social media and on Spotify. The online information and handles are all located on the scrolling ticker at the bottom portion of your screen. We are on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Anchor FM, and Spotify. Simply search Tuesdays with Tally. And be sure to like, share, and subscribe to get every episode. And stay up to date with the latest and greatest our guest in this show has to offer. Now, folks, I want to tell you about a company based out of Canyon City, Colorado, called Chase's Choice. To put Chase's story into a few paragraphs is a daunting task. You see, Chase had undiagnosed epilepsy and was incorrectly diagnosed as having ADHD. The medication Chase was on caused him to become paralyzed, and he was told he would never walk again. Chase's father, Ken Reef, then turned his pain into purpose and dedicated his life to saving his sons. And Ken did just that. To this day, he is an industry leader in cannabis and hemp products and continues to heal those in need. Whether you are struggling from physical pain, anxiety, depression, or having trouble sleeping, there is a product for you that will improve your quality of life. Chase's story is a powerful reminder that what is legal is not always just, and what is just is not always legal. Ken continues to fight to further the conversation through education, research, and development on the benefits of cannabis and hemp, CBD, CBG, CBN, THC, and all of the other cannabinoids found in the plant. To learn more, visit Chase's Choice online today at chaseschoice.org. That's chaseschoice.org, or call Ken directly, 719-994-0141. That's 719-994-0141. Now, CBD was Chase's choice. What's your choice? Always consult with your doctor before starting any alternative medicine products, and always check with your state and local municipalities on the laws regarding the use of CBD and hemp products. Folks, today we celebrate another milestone. This is day 131 of this brand new podcast and our 92nd episode. Yes, folks, 92 episodes and 131 days. Who's next? Who is going to be next? And the reason why I love Tuesdays is because, that's my show name, Tuesdays with Tally. And every other day should be Today with Tally. But hey, I got to figure out, once this show came to me on a mindfulness walk, it was a Monday night. I started my first show. It was on a Tuesday. I didn't know I'd be doing them every single day. So on Tuesdays are extra special days. And that's when we have our extra special guests, like the one joining us today. Now, I want to welcome to the show Sarah Adams. She is an award-winning targeting officer and global threat advisor with extensive domestic and international experience. She is the chief operations officer of the Ukraine NGO Coordination Network. UNCN is an umbrella organization using a team of teams concept to bring together over 40 international NGOs to aid humanitarian efforts in Ukraine. With a career that has spanned the government, private, and non-profit sectors, she has worked overseas on behalf of the U.S. government's intelligence mission in Europe, the Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia. Most recently, she led Department of Defense research and development efforts to discover, incubate, and deliver innovative solutions to complex national security challenges. Previously, Sarah has served as a senior advisor to the U.S. House of Representatives after being recruited as an executive appointment out of the CIA. She is also the co-author of Benghazi, Know Thy Enemy, a cold case, open source investigation into the al-Qa'ida terrorists who attacked the U.S. Consulate and CIA Annex in Benghazi in 2012. She holds a master's degree in international relations from the University of San Diego and a bachelor's of science in international business from the University of Central Florida. And with that, we welcome to the show, Sarah Adams. How are you, ma'am?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
The pleasure is all mine. The pleasure is all mine. You have quite the resume here, and we are going to take a dive into this, and we're going to get to know a little bit more about you and what inspires you, what makes you go, and where you are today in your walk in life. As we gather around the Christmas tree here very, very soon to celebrate Christmas with our friends and family. And I wanted to have you on because you had just written a new book. And again, it makes for a tremendous Christmas present. And there's so much information out there that it was new, that it was coming to light. So it takes special folks like yourself to sit down and put pen to paper and really dive into what happened during that day in 2012 in Benghazi. So let's get started. Sarah, can you tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're from?
Yeah, I'm actually from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. They call us Yoopers. We're a special category. Basically, we're the first line of defense when Canada invades, so they better watch themselves. So that's kind of, I got my start in a small town. And when you live in a small town, all you want to do is travel the world because you want to get out of your small town. And that's kind of where it all kicked off.
Small town girl from the Upper Peninsula, ready to protect the northern border, right?
Exactly. You gotta watch it. They're tough up there.
I've known some folks from the UP. I mean, they go out there with their bare hands and they cut their firewood and they chop down trees with their. I mean, some tough folks up there for sure.
Yeah, they're all tough up there. You better watch it,
including you. So, tell me about what led you to becoming a traveler, a world traveler. You would end up becoming an award-winning targeting officer. Can you explain exactly what a targeting officer is to our listeners?
Sure. I first will do the really quick part of becoming a world traveler. I got really lucky when I was in junior high, and my mom had like a midlife crisis. I hope she doesn't watch this episode. And she quit her job. She was like a senior engineer. And she went and worked on cruise ships. So I actually got to go on very long cruises for many, many years with my mom and kind of see the whole world. So that's where I got that hook. Basically, after I went to college at University of Central Florida, my degree had been international business. And I wanted kind of a different take on it. And so my grad degree was international relations. And that's kind of when I got to that security policy side of things. And then I focused on the Kashmir region of India and Pakistan at the time. So when my degree ended, I kind of only had a few places I could apply to a job, the CIA and maybe the State Department, because I don't know where else you can work on Kashmir in the United States. And so I just applied online and I luckily got in. So pretty simple.
Incredible. So tell me a little bit about cruising as a child. What was your favorite destination?
I really liked Alaska because we went on a helicopter and walked on a glacier. So when you're young, something like that is super cool. And it made me realize I'm scared to death of helicopters. So anytime I was overseas, I'm like, oh, it's gonna be the helicopter now. I don't think I need to go on it. That was probably my favorite, but really just being with my mom. She's pretty laid back and let me kind of do anything. So I got to do a lot of exploring. I got to meet a lot of cool people. She would go into the Naples port and it was run by the mafia. You learn a lot about the underbelly of ports. And, as a young child, you can actually learn a lot of things you wouldn't learn just as a regular traveler somewhere.
It's funny you say Alaska. I was just invited last week by my friends from the Alaska Adventure Project to be a guest with them for 1 week out in Alaska, September 1 through 6. So I'm very excited to begin preparing for that because that's going to be a lot of fun. We'll be fishing and all that stuff. It's just a group of veterans that go out and do some really good things in the community and, help those veterans out there in need. I'm going out there to be a podcaster to kind of interview some of the folks that are willing to sit down with me who are out there that could talk about their, past military service and all that stuff. So when you said Alaska, that was like, I'm going to be there soon. I can't wait. So.
But luckily you're not going soon, because I think it would be pretty tough in January.
Yeah.
Like, you might be kind of weak being a Texan or Floridian type of person up there.
Yeah, that dog won't hunt for me up there right now. I'll tell you that. It's cold down here in Houston now. I mean, it's going to be like 2 degrees in a couple of days. And I'm like, holy cow. And, and I have connections to Colorado, as well. And I tell you, my body can't handle the cold anymore. So I'll definitely be huddled around that campfire. So there's a lot of folks that are listening right now, Sarah. They're going to be like, what is a targeting officer? Can you explain what exactly that is?
Yeah. I mean, I usually tell people if they saw Zero Dark 30, the whole movie is what a targeter officer is, because she was one of the most famous targeting officers in the CIA. But basically, it's your job to kind of like find the targets. It could be a target like a bad guy to go after. It could be a target to recruit. And then you basically fix them in a location to either capture him or have someone kind of meet him to try to recruit him. And then you kind of finish it, right? So you either capture the target and detain and do the debriefings of him, or a case officer in the CIA goes and talks to them and see if they'd be willing to work for the United States.
Wow, that's quite the job. I mean, there's not too many folks out there that have that on their resume.
No, it's a very select few. They're really only at CIA and JSOC, so I think we're the only ones in the whole world.
Do you have any experiences that you could share about, a job that you did one day on a targeting call that you got put on, or and if you can't, don't, but just curious.
I'm trying to think. I mean, there's always like so many funny things when you're overseas, right? Because nothing happens how it's supposed to. So it's not really a job I was on, but one time when I was in Libya, the case officers invited a random like head of a militia over to our compound for like dinner. And so, our chief of station is like, what are you talking about? Like, you invited him here? And he's like, doesn't he have like a gun truck or something? And he's like, yeah. He's like, is he going to drive that onto our compound? He's like, well, maybe. So we actually made our analysts go out and we dressed them in like those bib overalls and stand at the gate and pound it. And so when he pulled up with his gun truck, he pulled up with 3 gun trucks. And he pulled up and he said, sorry, the gate's broken. You'll have to walk in. And so we like parked him outside. So like funny stuff like that happened all the time. Like people always think the CIA has everything squared away. And every day you're like, what's this mess we got to deal with now? Because you're overseas and just, things don't work on time. It's not like Germany and everything goes on time in sequence as it's supposed to go when you're overseas.
Mm-hmm. Not exactly what the movies want to portray it as. What was it like working in the CIA?
At first, you go in and you're like, oh, should I even be here? Like, did they make a mistake? Like, I have a common name. Did they hire like the wrong Sarah Adams and they're going to like pull me out in a few weeks? And then they tell you this thing like, oh, you have 3 years, you're under a probation. So you actually feel like a little nervous, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to mess something up and they're going to kick me out, right? But once you get over that, it's a really cool place to work because basically they tell you, hey, we hired you because you're the best. And so you're not like treated as a trainee. You have a seat at the table from the beginning. So it's a really cool place to, you just blossom like really quickly and you get experiences under your belt. Within a year, I was already in a foreign country. And it's just, you get to meet like the heads of state of other countries, the heads of militaries. You get to meet some of the coolest spy types in the world. Like I've met some foreign intel officers that have just like blown my mind with like their background and what you learn from them. So it's just a really unique kind of place to be in.
So it sounds like an amazing job. I mean, who wouldn't want to be a part of the CIA? I mean, in the United States of America, that's a very prestigious type job and appointment. Now, you had gotten a bachelor's of science in international business from the University of Central Florida, and you had stated, there's only maybe a couple places I could work, Pakistan, and when you were in college at the University of Central Florida, did you know that you would ultimately become a member of the CIA, or did that just fall in your lap as you got out of college?
Yeah, that fell in my lap as I finished my master's. When I was in my undergrad, I actually wanted to work kind of like international trade and negotiations, that type of thing. So I always thought I'd do that for an international company globally. And then when I went to grad school and my grad school had a very strong focus on regional security and national security. And they kind of just hooked me into a whole nother sector I never even had considered.
So when you were recruited as an executive appointment, like, can you explain how that all happened?
Yeah, that was actually being recruited by Congress. So I was in the CIA, and a couple congressmen came to Florida to meet me, and they wanted me to come be the senior advisor on the Benghazi committee. So basically, an executive appointment is just you still keep your government service. So I basically left CIA on a Friday, and I started in Congress on a Monday, and then just kept going with my federal service. I just now was serving Congress.
What led you to becoming contacted by the U.S. House and serving as a senior advisor on the Benghazi committee?
I have theories on who gave them my phone number. It wasn't me. So really, they were just told again and again, you need to talk to Sarah. She's the expert. She was our targeter. And then when they came down and I told them information they had never heard before, they were kind of hooked to on, hey, we need to bring this person on because of her expertise and her knowledge.
It's been 10 years since the attack in Benghazi. Were you in Benghazi at the time of this attack?
I was in Benghazi that morning, and then I flew out of Benghazi airport to Europe for a meeting. So I actually missed the attacks, and then I came back to Libya the day after.
Mm-hmm.
I have really lucky timing.
So I want to get into your book a little bit here. And I don't want to be fast forwarding through this. I mean, there's so much information that we can get to that I think is going to be so important to this podcast. And, that will be, a lot of relevance to your book. Now, you just put a brand new book out there, Know Thy Enemy. Well, it's Benghazi, Know Thy Enemy, a cold case, open source investigation into the al-Qa'ida terrorists who attacked the U.S. Consulate and CIA Annex in Benghazi in 2012. Now, again, that was 10 years ago. And this book is brand new. What inspired you to sit down and co-author a book of something that happened 10 years ago? Was there information that came to light that you said, wow, I need to talk about this?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. When I joined the Benghazi committee, that would have been January 2015. Within 3 or 4 months, it became very clear to me no one was actually going after the attackers in the intelligence community. Because after Benghazi, I went and worked Iran. So I started working Libya, but as a CIA officer, I just assumed someone in the CIA was going after the attackers. And, I didn't have a need to know, so I didn't pay attention to it. So when I actually realized nobody in the FBI and in the CIA were actually basically hunting the attackers down, locking them up, debriefing them as detainees, etc. That's when I got with Boone and said, hey, if we don't do this, it'll never get done. No one will ever know who attacked us if we don't invest the time and the money. And he was kind of the one that kept it going. It was a long process. It took us 6 years until we actually sent the book to CIA. So, he was the one keeping me going because I kept getting discouraged, being like, they're not going to do anything. I mean, we would talk to Libyans. The Libyans would be like, why are you guys wasting your time? Your government's not going to do anything. So we always got negative feedback as we worked through it, that there wouldn't be justice. But we kept our heads down. We did it in private. And then we decided to actually put our investigation into book form. We spent about 15 months coordinating it through the CIA and the DoD, and then now it's out.
Why wouldn't we go after those responsible for attacking our CIA Annex building and ultimately killing 4 to include Ambassador Stevens?
Yeah, I mean, it's really unfortunate. We've obviously, since we've run our investigation, we have discussions with a lot of people, behind closed doors. And really, it's the politics of it. The fact that our government said, it was a protest that got out of hand. The worst was, though, they locked up a fake mastermind. So once they locked him up, they couldn't go actually detain the real attackers in the United States for justice, because they'll have lawyers and they'll be on the stand and they'll say, that's not the guy I reported to. I reported to, Mukhtar or whomever in al-Qa'ida they reported to. So they had to actually basically cover up the real attackers to keep the narrative going all this time. So it's actually very discouraging.
What would that narrative be?
Well, their narrative, what would the correct narrative be?
What was the narrative that they were driving to actually lock up fake masterminds behind this attack?
Yeah, well, it was the fact that they wanted you to think it was a protest that got out of hand. So they basically had to pick kind of a not really known militant, low-hanging fruit, easy to capture. He's not savvy. He's not wealthy. He actually has some mental issues. He was tortured previously in prison. So he's not, he's not a college Sheikh Mohammed, for example. If you stuck him in a courtroom, he's not going to be able to defend himself properly. So that was what they did. So they didn't have to actually tell you it was an al-Qaeda attack. He wasn't even actually an attacker, and he's in prison for 22 years in the United States.
So are you telling me that they cherry-picked a fall guy based on his mental capacity?
Yeah, and actually in Libya, they actually call him the scapegoat. The terrorists call him the scapegoat.
So the work that you have done, once you found out that our government wasn't going after the people in the militants that were held responsible for what happened in Benghazi in 2012, you sat down with Boone, who was there, boots on the ground, with folks like Chris Tanto-Paranto and John Tig-Tigan. Now, you put this all together and you strategized this for over 15 months, and you delivered this book to the CIA. What did the CIA think about your discovery and your open source investigation?
I don't really know CIA's opinion on an open source investigation. We basically, as you can imagine, what CIA cares about is when we talk about our time in the CIA, right? When we arrived in Libya, what we did for the CIA. That's actually what CIA cares about, because when they go and edit your publication, it's so you don't give up any CIA sources and methods, if that makes sense. So I don't really think they have any sort of opinion on our investigation, at least the publication review board people, right? Because I don't think they care. We actually did it completely open source, so we'd be able to share it with whomever we wanted, because we didn't think the US government was doing anything. So it would hopefully help foreign governments have a little more evidence to go after some of these guys.
Now, you being a former member of the CIA, I mean, obviously, if you're writing a book, you would know to not put certain sources into a book, but you still needed to get the blessing, correct, of the DOD and the CIA before this went to publication?
Yeah, and I actually pushed the envelope. I put everything in the book I wanted to put in the book, and I was like, well, I'll leave it up to CIA to take out what they want. And they actually only redacted one name from the book. They did a few others, but I pushed back and they approved them. So they only actually took one name out of the book, and he wasn't actually an attacker. So, I was pretty pleased with the process, and it actually went really well. We had a really good relationship through the process.
Folks, we're being joined by Sarah Adams, an award-winning targeting officer, former CIA member, and she has a brand new book titled Benghazi, Know Thy Enemy. It is available everywhere books are sold online. Go to Amazon, go wherever you get your books, buy it today. I guarantee that you are going to want to read this book, or a veteran, or just anybody who's curious on what happened over in Benghazi in 2012 that led to the 13-hour stand down of our men fighting in this horrifying battle that took place at the CIA Annex. Now, if you order today, it may be gift wrapped and put under that Christmas tree in time for Christmas, but I would definitely do not delay and get that book today, right? sounds pretty good. Do not delay. Get that book today. Again, Sarah's new book is titled Benghazi, Know Thy Enemy. Now, what was it like working in the U.S. House of Representatives as a senior advisor, going through all of the facts that were detailed about what actually happened in Benghazi? And did we ever get to the bottom of it as a country?
So the Congress is interesting, right? It's a different pace than the CIA. So that took me some time to get used to. The cadre was very different, right? I'd be like, oh, why'd you get on the committee? How'd you get on? And they'd be like, oh yeah, my dad, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, you've no background on Libya or anything. So all that was very interesting to learn. But I think the committee did a really good job on kind of just seeing like some of the DOD failures, the State Department failures, but unfortunately their purview wasn't to go after the attackers, or even to do oversight of FBI's investigation that should have been going after the attackers. So I think that's kind of what's missing from that investigation. So the report's done really well. For people who haven't read it, I would read it. It's a really great summary of what happened. But again, my focus is I want to go after the bad guys. I don't really care about finger pointing at this time, because these organizations aren't going to do anything. They fail their people upward. It's a very frustrating thing. Let's at least stop the terrorists from killing more people.
Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense to say the common folk like me on how we would stand down. Do you think that this book will provide the justice that these men deserve that were killed in action in Benghazi?
I hope it does. I hope at least it keeps other people safer. Luckily, we've had a lot of great interactions with people all around the world since the book's been out. It is leading to things like watch listing. It's leading to things that'll stop these terrorists from moving around. Some of them, nobody even knew they were terrorists, right? So we really have made these guys now look behind their shoulder. We have other countries know, hey, they're traveling here. They were involved in Benghazi. So we do think there will be justice. Have we gotten a lot of support from the U.S. doing justice or being honest about, the mastermind and all that? We haven't seen any indications of that happening yet, unfortunately.
Do you have any details or any intel into perhaps some of the bad players that were involved in this from 10 years ago? I mean, because, let's face it, 10 years is a long time. And perhaps one of these masterminds could have been killed in another, attack, or could have just died from natural causes or had a heart attack or anything like that. Have you gotten any word on some of these guys, maybe even already passing, or are all these guys still alive and well?
Yeah, I like to joke jihadi life is tough. Luckily, in the book, every attacker we talk about, we give you his updated status. So if he's been killed, it's in the book. So there is a general, he's luckily still alive in Libya, General Haftar. He's killed close to half of the attackers. We have about 50 of them we still need to either go get, that they're at large. We need to find them, like we have been unable to locate them, or they're in prison sentences that they're likely going to get released. And so we need to make sure they stay locked up, if that makes sense. So there's about 50 in that category.
Now, I have a very, very important question here, and I bet the majority of the folks that are listening to this right now are probably going to say, thanks, Tally, for asking that. We have this common conception in the United States of America, being a part of the CIA is scary, right? There are so many movies out there. And a lot of the times you think, wow, this takes a very courageous and brave woman here to stand up in the face of adversity to seek justice. And that's not an easy walk. Do you ever feel as if like maybe you are scared of your life or afraid of being targeted yourself because of a publication you put out about this?
I mean, I'm not afraid of being targeted by the CIA. At least I think most people in the CIA are like me because I work there and they want justice and they want to go after the terrorists. I mean, you know, I've been long involved in Benghazi. I've already had the IRS targeting. I mean, luckily, when you've been involved in Benghazi for a decade, most things have already happened to you. We get death threats. I mean, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of people who just don't really believe things regarding Benghazi, or they don't trust us. And it's like, guys, I just want to go after the bad guys, like chill. So my problem's been more with, you know, the politicians and the politicians not doing the right thing. But yeah, the CIA is not going to bother us. You know, we did quality work, and then that's what matters.
Yeah, and my question wasn't geared toward the CIA. As I believe that they do want justice as well. It was more as like the terrorists. You know, we have terrorist cells here in the United States of America, whether we like to think that or not, that are coming here and that have opened up shop, if you will. Now, you being a former CIA officer, have this brand new book out, and you are calling out these, you know, these bad players, if you will. Now, is there ever do you believe that there's ever any intel coming from overseas back to the United States of America to say, that's the one right there that's writing all this stuff about us, and she's coming after us, so we need to eliminate that threat? Is there ever anything like that you've ever felt scared of?
Not currently. We've had that discussion. Obviously, we spent a huge chunk of our time to decide first if any were in the U.S. so we could alert authorities. Unfortunately, like I said, there are some we've never found. There's places I probably won't go to now, like Turkey. Turkey is probably off my list for a very long time, just because a lot of our terrorists actually frequent Turkey or they live in Turkey. I'm not exactly concerned about the terrorists. Like I said, the death threats come from the far left. You know, I was a Democrat for 20 years, but it doesn't really matter to them, right? Because I'm just talking about Benghazi, unfortunately. So I'm more worried about crazies in my own country than I'm actually worried about the terrorists. And my goal is to watch list the terrorists so they can't get to my country, right? And that's a key to keep any American safe.
Now that you had mentioned that you were a Democrat for 20 years, and I wasn't going to bring politics into this, but you opened the door there. So I'm going to ask, well, what does that have to do with what you did here with this new book?
Yeah, the crazy part is, so me and Boone are pretty apolitical. I mean, we're both known for this. But the odd part is there's people who still think like they think our book is to like do something to Hillary, or like they haven't read our book, right? So they're making assumptions of what's in the book, or they're making assumptions as to why we did the book without actually looking at the book. So that's the sad part, right? They think we're trying to do something political, and it's like, guys, we want to go after the terrorists. That's the point. I mean, an ambassador died. I mean, our friends died, but the ambassador is like killing the president, you know, when you're in a foreign country. And we'd like to see something done for him. You know, he was a great man and he deserves more than he's been given.
I want to share this with you. There's something I got presented to me by John Tig Tigan. It's got the Ambassador Christopher Stevens on the front of it, Department of State, as well as Sean Smith. And you got Tyrone Woods, and then you have Glenn Bub Doherty here. And this challenge coin is extremely, extremely heartfelt. And I mean, it is amazing. It's an amazing piece of work here. And those men's memories will never be forgotten in my life as who I am as a person, because I believe that day was one of the worst that we've seen, I mean, in American history, I mean, on what happened there, and how, you know, folks, like I said, like Tig and Boone and Peranto had to hold down this CIA annex, right, for 13 hours until help arrived. Why, you know, as a former CIA officer, what took so long to get reinforcements in there?
Yeah, sure. Well, you know, there really were no U.S. reinforcements. There was the only American who actually ever responded to Benghazi was CIA's chief of station in Tripoli. So he sent that Team Tripoli force. You know, in the movie, it's led by Bub. That's not exactly who it was led by in real life, but it doesn't really matter. So he sent that rescue force. The problem is, though, they got held up at the airport by the gentleman who shot the mortars at the CIA Annex. So for hours, they just sat at the airport and couldn't do anything anyway. The actual rescue force, which people don't understand, is Gaddafi's people. So Gaddafi loyalists saved everybody from the CIA Annex and brought them to the airport. And then the two planes who brought him out, the first plane was a Gaddafi loyalist private plane. The second plane was actually the Libyan Air Force, and it was just kind of a old dusty C-130 that they could only fly in the daytime, and they flew it over and took everyone back to Tripoli. So there was no U.S. response to say when it comes to Benghazi, and that's a thing, right? I mean, I work there. I obviously know everyone who passed. This does matter to us, and knowing who did this to us is important to us who serve there.
Now, I remember when this all happened. It broke across the newswire as there was a video released, and they didn't like the video, and they attacked on this because of what was in this video, and that would all end up being, I think, just hogwash.
Right.
I think is what that conclusion was drawn, that that's not what happened. Do you know what the real true motivation was that day for those Libyans to break barrier and go in there and attack Americans?
Yeah, there's two pieces. We'll first focus on the Consulate attack, where unfortunately the ambassador and Sean died. That was a planned al-Qa'ida attack. They started planning it in June. And basically, it's not the date that mattered. That was just the first time the ambassador came to Benghazi. So that's when they pulled the plan and said, okay, today's the day we do it, because he's now here. So he came to country in May, but this was his first trip to Benghazi. So they were waiting for him to arrive. So that's kind of why it ends up falling in the week it fell in. The second attack, though, the attack on the CIA Annex, that was an attack of opportunity. There was a well-known terrorist in Benghazi who decided to shoot the mortars to basically get CIA out of Benghazi. And he made that decision in real time when he heard Americans were coming in to save them. So he got a phone call that Team Tripoli was coming. He did not know Team Tripoli was like 8 guys. He thought U.S. was coming in to rescue everyone. And so he made the decision at that point that he was going to attack the CIA Annex.
This is so fascinating. When you started putting all this together and started connecting the dots on this, what came to your mind?
The connecting of the dots. You would be amazed. When you go through the book, you'll see everyone is so intertwined, and it goes back a very long time. I think we have 5 or 6 guys who were in Sudan with Osama bin Laden. We have about up to 10 people who fought in Afghanistan. We have a very large number of guys connected to Iraq. Either they fought in Iraq, their brothers fought in Iraq, or their fathers fought in Iraq. A lot of guys fought together in the Algerian Civil War. The funny part is, right, our government wanted to lie and say there's random protesters, and they made the lie against guys who'd been terrorists for decades. And that was a huge failure on their part. Like, it was like the worst lie ever, right? Because you can find a guy in Afghanistan with, bin Laden back in the day. That isn't a guy protesting over a video. Give me a break. So, yeah, it was just how interconnected they all were. And the other really interesting part is basically that the attack was directed by Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri, the al-Qaeda leader, who died this last summer in Kabul. But it mattered so much to him. He tapped into networks before Afghanistan. He was in his Egyptian Islamic Jihad, and you'd be really surprised how many guys in the book were involved in EIJ. I think people are going to be shocked by that. I think a lot of people, if you tell them it's terrorism, they think it's this group called the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group, LIFG, but that wasn't the case at all. This really came out of Egyptian terrorism, those old historic Zawahiri networks. And a lot of people look at Zawahiri, oh, he's a religious advisor. That guy's an operational planner. He's been planning attacks back to when, he basically, went against Egypt's leader. He worked against our embassies in Africa when they were attacked. He's always been involved in operational planning, and Benghazi is kind of one of the ones he got away with.
Incredible. Folks, we're being joined by Sarah Adams, a former member of the CIA. She has a new book titled Benghazi, Know Thy Enemy, It is available everywhere books are sold online. Buy it today. Don't delay. Get it Christmas wrapped and put under that tree for anybody that's in the military or veterans, or really anybody, any American. This is all great information here that is, been compiled by folks that were there, Boone and a former CIA officer here in Sarah, to put all of the facts together 10 years after this brutal attack that left 4 Americans killed, to include the ambassador of Benghazi in Libya. So I want to know the date, September 11th. Was that on purpose, or did it just happen to be that would be the day that all this stuff went down due to the circumstances of the Americans coming in and the ambassador arriving?
Yeah, well, the terrorists were pretty lucky because they had actually insiders who worked in the compound. So basically, September 11th was chosen for a very unique reason. I mean, it was basically a second day in town, but it was the only day he was staying on the compound the entire day. So the terrorists, their goal was to capture the ambassador, right? So you needed to make him time and place predictable. So they chose the day he wasn't going to leave the compound. So they knew he'd be there. And then they actually waited until he bedded down, and they got confirmation from the terrorists inside that, hey, he is now in his villa, you can attack. So once he went to his room for the night, they then kicked off the attack. And even when you watch the video, all they cared about is getting into the building and getting to them. And that's why they then started the fire on his villa, because they wanted to smoke him out. And even when they actually fled the compound, they reported it back to al-Qa'ida as a failed attack because they didn't capture him. So they viewed it as a failure initially within al-Qa'ida leadership.
So when this all happened, it took time for everybody to gather around the compound. All of the bad players, if you will, all the terrorists, all the Libyans that were on the ground there that were wanting to engage and get into that compound. At that time, did our men ever call in reinforcement at that time to say, hey guys, it looks like that we're under a pretty significant threat here. Let's get reinforcements in right now?
No, I'll do parts to that. First, remember, almost 5 hours prior, the Cairo consulate, there was the protest outside, but the protesters, over 20 of them actually scaled the wall. They didn't even start positioning to send people to Cairo in case the embassy was overrun. So think about that. So now this is 5 hours later. The crazy part is the terrorists did start coalescing outside the consulate an hour before the attack happened. They weren't visible on camera because remember, they had insiders. Also, the police vehicle that was sitting outside was working with the terrorists. So he didn't report that they were forming outside. And then the rest of the terrorists in Benghazi actually formed in different parts of the city and then basically traveled in when it was time for the attack. So they did not know inside the consulate there was an attack until the first RPG was fired, and they were overran within the next minute. They had no time.
Incredible. It just happened so fast.
Mm-hmm, correct. Now, if our allies would have been allies, there would have been at least an hour plus lag time and much more, right? Because a lot of the people we worked with in town knew the attack was happening. They knew days in advance the attack was happening. They just also wanted to get us out of town. They were tired of the U.S. influence in Libya. They wanted the militias to have power.
Ultimately, there was a breach here. There was some sort of failure in upper, perhaps, leadership. Now, I just don't understand. And again, there's so many unanswered questions about what happened here. Again, to put myself in the shoes of, say, a Tig, right? Or a Boone. I mean, this had to have been an absolute horrifying day to do what these men did. I mean, talk about bravery and service and sacrifice. once they had the reinforcements in there, what did it look like then? And how did these folks begin to pick up the pieces on exactly what happened when it went down so fast?
Yeah. So what a lot of people don't understand, because the false narrative said 20 protesters, a lot of people don't actually understand there's 150 terrorists at this attack. I mean, just the sheer number, it's actually the largest attack on a U.S. institution by the number of bodies. So when the rescue force finally came, the Gaddafi loyalists, they brought in 30 armored vehicles and, plenty of personnel within those vehicles, because luckily they were Gaddafi's people and understood the threat in their own city, right? So they did bring in enough forces to at least evacuate the Americans safely. But when you're talking about figuring out who did it after the fact, FBI, they did come into country, into Tripoli, but it was almost a month until they traveled to Benghazi to do an investigation, and they only stayed in Benghazi one day. So imagine the quality of investigation when you spent one day collecting evidence in the city a month after an attack happened.
What was the delay on the part of the FBI?
There's two parts. First off, I was in country when they arrived, and they actually arrived and their return ticket was 4 days later. So I actually don't think they ever planned to go to Benghazi. They then got pressure to stay and investigate more and go to Benghazi. They didn't even bring a computer. That's how short they planned their trip to be. So they were kind of forced to do it a little bit, and then they didn't have any kind of security. They didn't have any relationships in country. This is one of the problems with FBI doing investigations of terrorist attacks overseas. They don't have the relationships. They're not based in a lot of these places. They're just not the right bodies to be doing it. So they didn't have the relationships to begin with. So they had to rely on CIA to bring them to Benghazi. And obviously that then based on when CIA can go back and those security approvals and whatnot. So yeah, it was a CIA team that brought them to Benghazi.
And you had said that they were there for only one day?
Correct. Yep. They went in and out the same day. They didn't even spend a night.
I can't imagine the money that was spent to get there, to just turn around to come right back and really gather really no real information. Yeah,
correct. I mean, the whole FBI investigation, I have opinions on it. There were people, obviously, who are my friends who worked in the investigation for the FBI, but I do not think there was a real willingness to identify the real terrorists involved. And I do think politics played a role. And, I would hope something like that would be investigated in the future. I know people are sick of Benghazi investigations. I don't want a Benghazi investigation. I want an investigation into why people were paying them and they're not doing their damn jobs.
Folks, we're being joined by Sarah Adams, who is an expert on Benghazi, on that attack in September 11th of 2012 in Benghazi. Now, I have a question here. Again, I think a lot of people are going to want to know. This all happened 10 years ago. You have brought so much to light through your research and your investigation, right? A cold case investigation that we've never really had any justice on. And again, it takes a brave, courageous, dedicated, and determined woman like yourself to get to the bottom of these facts here. And again, I credit you. You are doing the job that nobody wants to do. And again, you're putting a lot out there. You're putting yourself out there, and it's very risky. Do you believe now, knowing what we know now about what happened 10 years ago and having this book out with all this new detailed information of what actually happened, are we looking perhaps at a new investigation in the U.S. House of Representatives in the 118th Congress that begins in January?
I'm not sure we have a new Benghazi investigation, nor do I think we need to. I think there's a few things we do need the House to do for us. I think one is, the committee that covers Homeland Security. They do need to make sure all the terrorists in our book are watch listed. They also need to make sure all the terrorists that got released in Afghanistan over the last year are watch listed, so they aren't coming to the U.S. So I do think Congress needs to evoke that oversight. I do think they need to do some work on oversight of FBI just as part of their daily job, not a special investigation, but they need to say, hey, this was your purview. You were given this investigation. While the attack was happening, it was handed over to the FBI, right? So they have had this investigation for 10 years. So someone does need to say, we're doing oversight. Why do these two random Americans have 10 times more information than you have on the same attack? Like, what the heck? You've spent millions and millions and millions of dollars of taxpayer dollars, and they have more info than you. So I do think appropriate oversight needs to be done, but I don't think that's an investigation. I think that's you do your job. If you don't do your job, we're going to pull funding and we're going to move this to a department or another agency who can do the job more effectively.
Your end goal here is justice. Ultimately, I believe that's what led you to write this book. Now, it's scary there when you say that our government is releasing these known terrorists. Why are we releasing terrorists?
Yeah, we release terrorists. It's the most frustrating thing on earth. Even when you talk about the Arab Spring was just the largest release of terrorists that ever existed. When people call it democratic, I'm like, what are you talking about? It made terrorism like 100,000 times worse. So we work on very short time frames, right? So my most senior capture, he was released in part of Taliban negotiations with the U.S. government. They send us overseas and they make us sacrifice our lives from our families to go after these guys, and we don't hold them. They don't bring them justice. Look at Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. He did 9/11, and they're taking the death penalty off the table. It's very, very frustrating when you serve in our community. And like I said, it's because we don't make those end plans. We work on stuff. We work on political talking points. We work on what is sexy at this second. And then the rest just falls to the wayside, unfortunately.
We are living in some wild times. It's what's going on the very top of the government right now when they're releasing bad people, right? All of our service members fought hard to capture those people, to capture those bad terrorist groups who have blood on their hands, who have killed Americans in combat or through terrorist attacks. And our government is releasing them back to civilization, to give them their freedom and their liberty back, if you will, to continue the fight against American people. It almost reminds me on lower levels, in our counties, in our cities, now across America, we've got DAs that are releasing convicted felons on sometimes no bond to have these police officers continue to put their life at risk, to rearrest, to put them back in jail for only them to get right back out again. It seems as if we are playing this game of cat and mouse here that's never going to end. And so we're always chasing our tail. Why is this happening in our country? Do you have any, what are your thoughts on this?
I just think we're so used to failing. Now, you talk about investigations. One I would like to see is why we didn't secure the Bagram prison. We snuck out in the middle of the night, pulled security from it, and then basically the next day, the Taliban came, opened the doors, and released up to 10,000 guys. That's criminal. Remember, these terrorists want to kill us. And some of these, and there's two main prisons in Afghanistan. Some have been there since 9/11. You think they're just going to retire after the U.S. locked them up for 20 years? Yeah. I think we've just gotten used to failing, and our politicians don't care because they know in 24 hours a news cycle is going to focus on something else, and they know they're not going to be held accountable. There's no accountability anymore. Afghanistan's a great example. No one was held accountable. Of course, no one was held accountable for Benghazi. It's going to continue being that way because the American public don't ask for it. People rant on social media and this and that, but they don't go to the polls and vote in the right people. They just keep voting in the failures. We're allowing it to happen. We're almost complicit in our government failing us.
Will that change ever? Or are we heading down a really dark road, Sarah?
I don't know. I try to be positive, but I work Libya, Ukraine, and Afghanistan in my free time. So my life sucks. But I really think, I'm hoping I'm a Gen Xer, right? I'm hoping my generation steps up, that they help change these institutions. But, the problem is, and this is going to be really negative, but the problem is government people, like they're in government and then like, well, I got a pension and I don't want to work bold, and I mean, military is a nightmare, right? Like, look what they did to poor Stu Scheller. Don't talk out of line. Like, we won't get rid of the guy at top who messed all this up. We'll take this one guy and make him the scapegoat. So the problem is in the government, it's not, you get no benefit, right, from speaking out. And unfortunately, a lot of people do march in line, and we don't have the leaders we need to have.
Seems like almost the less you contribute in our society, the more you're rewarded these days, and the more you contribute in an honorable way, it seems as if the more that they throw the hammer down on you, and they for like say for example, our taxpayers, our families across this country who work hard, and again, they contribute in an honorable way. And so many folks out there are just getting, the bad end of the stick here through being, taxed and over-regulated, and, so much big government and the lives of so many good American citizens. And again, you got the people out there that are committing crimes, and they're doing really no real contribution to our communities, are the ones that are being rewarded to just go out, reoffend, and do bad stuff over and over again. It's like as if it's the whole world, right? That's going through this right now. And again, it just doesn't make any sense. Like Stuart Scheller, he's been on the show. That guy is my spirit animal. What a great guy. And again, a courageous and brave man who stood up in the face of adversity and fought for what's right. We can't all be wrong, is what he likes to say. And again, that could be said about you, as well as this Benghazi cold case investigation. Now, I want to end on this. Like you said, we need to be transparent in this country, and we need to be accountable when people make errors. Do you think that we will ever have accountability in this country for what happened on 9/11 in 2012 in Benghazi?
I don't think we have accountability in this country. The sad part is, oversight and accountability come through Congress, who doesn't have much teeth, or they do when it politically is beneficial to them. They do things for political points, right? They don't actually do what the Americans care about. I always give them the best example for people to understand this is they know the Saudi Arabia wasn't involved in the real 9/11, but it gets voter interest. It evokes passion. It gives people false hope they can collect money from the Saudis. And so every so many years, they bring it up and play that game, even though they know it's never going to go anywhere. And that's the sad part. And that's what they do with Benghazi. They use us. They use the attack, they use our fallen all they want, right? And they get away with it, but they don't actually stand in our corner and do the right thing by them. And unfortunately, like I said, unless we fire everyone in Congress and put real good Americans in it, we're going to keep having this problem.
Well, listen, Sarah, look, this has been a very intriguing and fascinating interview. And I do sincerely appreciate you coming on and being fully transparent, with us today to really talk about some of the things that happened over in Benghazi and then back here in the United States with so many, again, unanswered questions. And folks, if you want the answers to some of these questions, I urge you to go out today and get Sarah's new book. She is the co-author of Benghazi, Know Thy Enemy. This book is available everywhere books are sold online. Just Google Benghazi, Know Thy Enemy, a cold case open source investigation into the al-Qa'ida terrorists who attacked the U.S. Consulate and CIA Annex in Benghazi in 2012. Now, thank you so much for joining us today, Sarah. You are a pioneer, to say the least, in this cold case investigation, and you are a champion and an inspiration to so many people.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We sincerely appreciate everything you have done and continue to do in our military and veteran community. Your service, sacrifice, and dedication to our great nation is truly admirable.
Thank you.
Until next time, for Tuesdays with Tally, this is Brian Tally. Good night, Semper Fi, and God